Are we good? Okay, cool. If you can hear other things, I'm super sorry. I'm making do with what resources I have right now. So, hey, it's Campbell, and so for my extra credit project, I'm going to talk about globalization, specifically the current state of globalization in a late stage capitalistic society, which is what we're in right now. I'm not really going to focus too much on the economic aspect of it because this isn't an economics class. This is intro to visual culture. So I'm going to talk about the effects of globalization on culture. But in order to understand that, we got to give a brief overview of what globalization is. Excuse me, 1 second. All right, so the big idea with globalization is that it's the whole world becoming one giant interconnected, codependent economy, both in money and ideas. Or at least more than it is already. Globalization is, economically speaking, from my understanding, a pretty good thing. It lifts tariffs and taxes on certain foreign goods and lowers the price as well because everyone's codependent on one another. And I think that's pretty neat, but again, that's not exactly what we're here to talk about. I'm going to talk more about the cultural effects of all of this. Culturally speaking, globalization can be kind of hit or miss. On one end, especially in first world countries like ours, it's pretty cool because it allows us, again, culturally speaking, to enjoy things from other places and making it a lot more accessible. For example, foreign films and certain foods. But on the other hand, it allows certain companies to weasel their way into places that they do not belong in the sake of for the sake of capitalistic ventures, and it allows people to extort others for what they can do for them, and it's really morally gray, because most corporations don't really think of people as people. They think about them as what they can be made out of. So here's the thing, is that all of these ventures, it's all about money all the time. Most of these places, I'm going to be talking a lot about indigenous cultures too, because they are the most vulnerable. Corporations don't really think of, especially indigenous people, as people. They're more like animals that can be used, because they aren't, quote unquote, like us, because they have different values and ways of doing things. Obviously, I don't feel that way because indigenous people are people. I mean, what the heck? But again, corporations kind of feel that. So I'm mostly going to talk about Nestle. Nestle is a really awful company for a lot of reasons, and they're very hard to escape. A while back, Nestle went into some African tribes and with some baby formulas to try to get women to try out the new formulas and all this stuff, which is okay. Well, whatever. The thing is that the way that they did this, they encouraged women to completely stop breastfeeding their children and instead just use the formula, which they said there was no risk and there was virtually no difference whatsoever. This was just more reliable, which wasn't true. And they said that, the babies won't notice or anything like that, and, I guess on a surface level, they didn't notice, but nutrition-wise, there was a lot wrong with that. The thing is that, breast milk contains certain amounts of nutrients essential for developments, and to some extent, it protects children from certain diseases because their mothers are immune. And what happened is Nestle gave this formula to these women, and enough that they stopped lactating entirely, and then required the women to continue to purchase and make this formula with money they didn't have to begin with because Nestle wanted more money, which is a pretty awful thing to do if you ask me. And so now these women are left stranded in a very destitute area where they don't have access to these things, but they have children they need to feed, but they can't feed them themselves, so they have to buy these things, which that's awful. This has to do with globalization because Nestle went into these places in the name of globalization when in actuality they were just weaseling their way in hopes of spreading their wares in the name of capitalism. I didn't go super deep or thorough into it, but you get the gist of the idea that, extorting people, it's great because someone else is making money, right? The thing is, globalization isn't a bad thing. It just depends on how you want to use it. Globalization is awesome in certain aspects, but I feel like, especially with indigenous cultures, you just got to leave them alone and let them do what they've got to do because they are doing what they know how to do and what works for them. So, I hope that was enough to satisfy any questions with that. So thanks.